Hello, everybody. It is I, Mr. Aaron, returning once again. Now, I'm going to apologize up front if my voice sounds a little bit off today because I don't know what nefarious weed woke up out in the desert today. But I woke up this morning and my allergies had gone into overdrive, and my normal little allergy medicine that I've been taking the past couple weeks just didn't cut it today. I'm going to have to switch to the heavy-duty allergy stuff tomorrow. So if I'm a little off with the voices today, I apologize. It's just the allergies and whatever weed woke up out there. Anyway, we are going to be continuing the adventures of Hank the Cowdog, the case of the missing cat. Now, you may remember we left off last time. Hank was trying to get Pete in trouble with Sally Mae, and it backfired, and Hank ended up being the one getting smacked with the broom. And so Hank has decided that he needs to exact his revenge upon Pete the Barn Cat. So that is where we are picking up today. Chapter 10, The Infamous Black Hole of Mustard. I just didn't understand. Everything had been going my way. I had sniffed out all of Pete's sneaky tricks and had made the appropriate counter moves. I had held my temper, resisted the temptation to make hash out of him, and maintained iron discipline throughout. I had even laughed at him. I had known from the start what he was trying to do, and yet he had somehow managed to do it anyway. How could one cat be so lucky so often? It strained my concept of luck. It strained my concept of who I was and who I'd always wanted to be. It strained my... Oh, my eyes were rolling around in circles, and I appeared to be banging my head against the northwest leg of the workbench. Something bad was happening to me, fellers. I was losing control of my control. My instruments were shorting out. I felt myself spiraling toward the infamous black hole of mustard. In one last desperate effort to save myself, I took a firm grip on the cement floor with all four paws and fought against the tremendous swirling vacuum sweeper that threatened to swallow me up. And you won't believe this. I saved myself from vacuumization by singing a song. Why not? Music hath charms to soothe the savage beast, is the old saying. And here's how the song went. I don't understand what's going on here. It makes me have questions about my career. I used to have pride, I thought I was shrewd, so how come my game plan is coming unglued? My counter moves backfire, my plots go awry. I've got indigestion from Pete's humble pie. It's happened so often, I'm starting to think this cat will eventually drive me to drink. So to save the dignity of my ranch, to stop this mental avalanche, I hereby burn the olive branch. I must dispose of the cat. It's not that I'm bitter or violent or mean. I'm not in the habit of making a scene. I don't take positions from which I won't budge, yet now I perceive that I'm holding a grudge. There's nothing too personal in this, I submit. Well, maybe I'm bothered by cats, I admit. They're hissing and yowling and humping their backs. I hate them, that's all, it's as simple as that. So to save the dignity of my ranch, to stop this mental avalanche, I hereby burn the olive branch. I must dispose of the cat. El Gato is rumored to have several lives, 9 I believe, which is 4 more than 5. But Gato and gravy served up on a plate will get the grand total down closer to 8. A kitty for supper, a kitty for lunch, a kitty con queso, and a kitty with punch. A kitty for snacks, oh my, this is fun! And shortly the total will shrink down to none. So to save the dignity of my ranch, to stop this mental avalanche, I hereby burn the olive branch. I must consider the pros and cons of bumping off the cat. When I had finished the song, I looked around. I was standing in the middle of the machine shed. The bells and whistles had vanished. My mind had cleared. Best of all, the infamous black hole of mustard had swallowed itself and returned to the ethers of the vapor, or wherever it is that black holes come from. But the important thing was that I had snatched myself back from the edge of despair and had survived one of the most dangerous moments of my career. And all at once, it was clear what I had to do. Oh, a few details still had to be worked out, but those were small matters of procedure. I wondered why I hadn't thought of this sooner. Surely it was a testimony to my sweet nature and gentle disposition. And yes, to a certain dread of consequences, Sally May, for example. I had a suspicion that she would not think kindly of my plots and schemes, and that fact pretty much determined the method I finally chose for the job. Here's what I did. I left the machine shed and, on silent feet, went hunting for the villain. I checked out the yard. He wasn't there, which was good. I checked those tall weeds around the water well, and he wasn't there either. I was on my way down to the corrals when I happened to glance to my left and saw something that brought bubbles of joy bubbling to the surface of my, something. Pete was asleep on my gunny sack bed beneath the gas tanks. This cat, who had been so cunning and shrewd only hours before, had made the incredibly dumb mistake of taking an afternoon nap away from the house and on my bed. He was making it easy for me, which I appreciated. There are several ways of kidnapping a cat, I should say, and also several ways of getting your eyebrows torn off of your face by a hissing, spitting, clawing little buzzsaw. Unless you happen to pick the cat up by the loose skin behind his neck, in which case he will hang as limp as a sock. You see, I had watched little Alfred in action on many occasions and had observed him dragging Pete all over the ranch in this manner. Pete never suspected a thing. I slipped up to the gas tank, scooped him up in my jaws, and was well on my way to the wild canyon country north of headquarters before he knew what was happening. You're taking me somewhere, Hanky. I couldn't respond because my mouth was full of cat, don't you see, and I didn't have anything to say to him anyway. It's a nice evening for a walk in the pasture, Hanky, but I think we've gone far enough. Silence. Hanky, I'm wondering where we're going. Are you listening? I was listening, but my heart had turned to cement. I continued on a northward course until I reached the base of the Cap Rock. There, I stopped and released the cat. Here we are, Kitty. This is where you get off. It's called Coyote City. Pete had his ears pinned back. He humped up his back and hissed at me. Also took a swipe at me with his paw, but I managed to dodge it. You know, Cat, if you'd ever shown any signs of wanting to get along with me, things never would have gotten to this point. But you're so greedy and spiteful, you forced me to take drastic measures. He yowled and hissed. You've driven me to this. What happens is your own fault. He yowled and hissed. Nobody ever deserved this more than you, Pete, but on second thought, It does seem a little severe, and if you approach me just right, I might consider accepting an apology. I'll give you an apology, Hanky. Just take 2 steps this way, and I'll give you an apology you'll never forget. There, you see, you cats won't compromise. You don't even try to get along. But after considering the finality of what we're doing here, I'm willing to give you one last chance to apologize and start all over with a clean slate. Cats don't compromise, Hanky, and we don't ever apologize for anything. If we can't run the show, we don't play. I shook my head. Hey, Pete, you might think we're playing games here, but let me point out that when I leave, you're going to be all alone in the middle of coyote country. He continued to glare at me. Cats enjoy being alone, Hanky, because when we're by ourselves, we're in the very best of company. This was hopeless. I began pacing. Listen, Cat, you don't know what you're talking about. Maybe you've never had any experience with coyotes, but I have, and I can tell you that their very favorite meal is fresh cat. Now, if you'll just... I can take care of myself, Hanky. I don't, need the help of a bumbling dog. I stopped pacing and our glares met. Okay, Pete, let's lay all the cards on the table. I brought you up here because I wanted to bump you off. Now that we're here, I find myself having second thoughts about it. If you'll just make a small apology, not interested, Hanky. Okay, if you'll promise to make a small apology within the next 3 days. Apology is a word cats don't understand, Hanky. All right, this is absolutely your last chance. If you'll promise to consider thinking about making a small apology, he grinned and shook his head. Very well, Pete. In that case, I have no choice but to order you to return to the ranch with me immediately. And that's a direct order. But, Hanky, I don't take orders. Not from you, not from anyone. Cats are very independent, and we take care of ourselves. Will you listen to reason? I yelled at him. This place is crawling with hungry coyotes. If I leave you here, you won't have a chance to take care of yourself before you'll be a kitty sandwich. He studied his claws. I'll go back with you, Hanky. That's better. If you'll make a full apology and complete apology, and if you'll agree to let me be head of ranch security forever. Huh? I stared at him. Are you crazy? You want me to... Okay, fine. I should have known better than to talk sense to a cat. Have it your way, Pete. I'm washing my paws of the whole mess. Goodbye and good riddance. And with that, I whirled around and headed back to headquarters, satisfied that I had done the world a tremendous service. Chapter 11. Total Happiness Without Pete. Trotting back to headquarters, I felt great. Wonderful, tremendous. At last, peace and quiet. At last, total happiness. At last... Oh, my dumb cat. How could he... Can you imagine him thinking that he could... Well, that was just fine. Everything had turned out for the... And furthermore, I didn't give a rip. And even if I did give a rip, it was a very small rip. I put it out of my mind. Just by George, wiped it out of my memory and forgot that I had... Never mind. I made it back to headquarters an hour or so before sundown and headed straight to Emerald Pond. It was time to check up on Mr. Stubtail. Sure enough, there he was, sitting in the water looking up at the clouds. I was glad to have something to take my mind off of, well, other matters, shall we say. All right, Drover, you can come out of the water now.
Hank, did you hear the news? Pete's gone. They can't find him anywhere.
Oh, really? My goodness, that's
Sally Mae and little Alfred looked all over for him. I'm kind of worried.
Worry about growing a new tail, Drover, and leave the cats to take care of themselves.
Yeah, but what if he wanders away and the coyotes get him?
I'll put my nose in his face. I don't want to talk about cats or think about cats. Do you understand?
Gosh, you're kind of touchy.
I'm not touchy. The subject bores me, that's all.
You didn't see Pete while you were gone, did you?
No, of course not. And why would you ask such a ridiculous question?
Just wondered. Where'd you go?
I went for a little walk, Pete.
I'm Drover. You called me Pete.
Well, yes, of course. How silly of me. I went for a walk. He looked at me and twisted his head to the side.
You're acting kind of funny. Is anything wrong?
Wrong? Why, heavens, no, everything's great. Wonderful. Terrific. Now get your little self out of the water, Pete, and let's have a look at your tail.
You just called me Pete again.
Get out of the water.
Gosh, you don't have to yell and scream.
I'm not yelling and screaming.
You are too, yelling and screaming, and don't understand why you're acting so funny all of a sudden. And my tail didn't grow one little bit.
How do you know that?
Well, I checked on it a couple of times.
You checked on it? You mean you got up out of the water?
Yeah, I got bored and tired of sitting.
What about the magic words? Did you say the magic words over and over for 2 solid hours?
Well, they weren't very solid.
What are you saying?
Well, I forgot the magic words after a while, and they were kind of boring too.
I shook my head. I should have known. Well, stand up. Let's have a look. I hope that your foolish behavior didn't cause a reversal of the growing process. His eyes flew open.
A reversal? You mean?
Exactly. Sometimes when you fool around with powerful medicine, it has bad side effects. It's possible, Pete, that you might have no tail at all.
Oh my gosh! What would everyone say?
They'd point at you and laugh and call you little Mr. Lost-his-tail.
Don't say that, Hank. I don't think I could stand it.
It'll be tough, Pete.
You called me Pete again.
I gave him a withering glare.
Will you stop talking about the cat? That's the 3rd time you've brought him up. Yeah, but that's the 3rd time you've called me Pete.
I did no such thing. Your name is Drover. You may have just lost your tail and you have more important problems to think about than a sniveling, troublesome cat.
Okay, I'll try.
We're lucky to be rid of him, and whatever happened to him, I'm sure he deserved it.
You're still talking about the cat.
And besides, you can't expect a cat to live forever. Even if he hadn't been eaten by coyotes, he probably would have died of gluttony.
What's gluttony?
Eating too much. You might recall that every evening at scrap time, Pete would go streaking to the yard gate and eat himself into a stupor of gluttony.
I guess you're right.
So as you can see, at that very moment, I heard the screen door slam up at the house. My ears shot up. So did Drover's. What's that?
Scrap time!
Holy smokes, we've got all the scraps to ourselves tonight. Come on, Drover, to the yard gate.
What about my tail? Bring it along. We'll look at it later.
We went streaking past the gas tanks and up the hill, and sure enough, we got there first and beat. Well, actually, there was no one to beat now that... we had all the scraps to ourselves, which sort of took a little of the challenge out of... I slowed down and walked the last 10 yards. I sat down in front of the yard gate, and Drover joined me.
Hank, I've got my stubbed tail back. I'm so happy.
Great. Glad to hear it. And I'm happy too, for slightly different reasons. With both of us happy, this should be a very happy evening.
Sally Mae was standing out on the porch, holding a plate of wonderful scraps, gazing off into the distance. All at once she began calling Pete. She called his name over and over. And on every calling of his name, I flinched with happiness, you might say, and wished that she would change the subject. And that is where we are going to end for today, guys. So that is where we'll pick up tomorrow at 2 p.m. Thanks so much for joining me, guys. If you did, be sure to check in when we continue the story tomorrow. Don't forget to check out our other live programs, Toddler Time with Miss Becky, Stories with Sunny, and Creating with Constance. Don't forget that you can go onto sweetwaterlibraries.com or call any one of the library buildings to schedule a curbside pickup of physical library items now, and you can still go to sweetwaterlibraries.com and access digital content through our online resources. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.